Do you, I mean, you don't have to get into too many specifics, but I know from having set up a pile of bows in my life and, you know, written about even more and seeing all the marketing speak and, all the claims out there. Do you feel like that the bow companies are like being a little bit more honest these days and falling in line a little better? Cause I know for a while we went through some stuff where it was like, those claims are insane for arrow
Yeah,
speeds.
I mean, some of the IBO claims, even from just a few years ago, were just crazy. And you check a few of those things and publish them in a national magazine, and all of a sudden, things get a little a little tighter. And I'm not saying there aren't still a few that spice things up a little bit, but I think for the most part they tend to be pretty close to what's advertised. And I think the other thing too, is so crazy. I mean, there's such a standard with compound bows, right? Of the speeds, and then with crossbows, there is no standard. It's kind of anything goes. And just almost as a rule, I mean, your advertised crossbow speeds are exactly what they are, when you start chronographing them. And as we've always done this vertical bow test, we've been doing the crossbow test right alongside it. And it's been kind of interesting to see that, we've published the crossbow speeds. They're always as advertised. And then the vertical bow speeds, kind of historically weren't. And then now they're kind of getting a little bit more in line. And I don't know if it's been a byproduct of that or not. But yeah, definitely. They seem to be a little more honest than they used to be. So.
Do you think that's partially because we kind of went through the speed phase and, I mean, when PSC dropped the X Force and everybody started turning their eyes to the chronograph, we went through a wild phase in the archery industry. And now it feels like, the top end advertised speeds, you see some of those bows creeping into like the 350s, but most of them, you're probably looking at 325 to 340 as advertised. And it sort of feels like everybody's at the same place. And so there isn't as big of a push for, we need to be, bumped way up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, this year, in particular, it seemed like a lot of the bows were a little bit slower across the board. Actually, we had a lot of our top end bows. Well, I mean, like I think our fastest bow this year, and again, this was set to IBO specs with an IBO arrow. The only thing that we don't do, like when we're chronographing, we do use a whisker biscuit just for simplicity's sake. We're not shooting them right off the shelf, and we do have a D loop. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you can expect a little loss of speed. We always kind of assume like 5 feet a second, maybe. But even so, the fastest bow this year was only like 330. Several of the companies kind of went the route of, having some of these extra tuning features and things like that built into them. And, in some cases it accommodating some of those things cost them a little performance. But even so, I mean, you get a bow that shooting 300 feet a second, it's plenty fast enough. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I look at it is, if you've set up for elk hunting or whitetail hunting and you shot your bow through a chronograph, you've seen pretty consistent speeds for probably the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And they're plenty fast enough. They just aren't, they aren't as glittery maybe as you'd see in an advertisement, but they're still, right. They're still blowing through elk and moose like it's
absolutely. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's interesting to see. And, you mentioned that about like some of the tuning features, and it seems like, you see companies like Bowtech does this a lot, and some other companies are doing this now where they're building in features to make it easier to modify your bow. Matthews did it as well. And I wonder if that's a response, because I don't feel like the average bow hunter is really asking for that, but maybe I'm wrong. But I wonder if it's a response to just us losing mom and pop bow shops and just the necessity of like, man, if you want to work on a bow and have it tuned, you might want to just do it yourself as much as you can.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think that could be a part of it. It's interesting that you should mention this. I mean, I actually interviewed one of the guys at Stress Engineering about this this year. As kind of a sidebar component of our bow test, and I mean, the reality is a lot of your bows are hitting. We had one last year that was, I think its efficiency rating was like 86%. And I mean, so long as you have a human being pulling the string, that's just about the best that you can get, And he said that, he made the point, he said, companies, when compound bows have reached that level of efficiency, they're paying a lot of money for that to eke out that extra 1 or 2%. And honestly, that's something that I'm never going to notice. You're never going to notice. And most of your bow hunters are never going to notice. And so, at the same time, the bow companies are still in business. And, I think kind of in some ways still hanging on to the good old days of when guys bought a new bow every fall, and expected a new bow every fall. And so the market does kind of demand that they put out a new product. And because we know that you can't just keep making them faster. You can't just keep making them more efficient. You can't keep making, there are a lot of things that, frankly, all the bow companies are doing pretty well to this point. And so I think some of these tuning features, they may be a response to closing of some pro shops. I know they've certainly, a lot of them have closed around here. But I also think, too, it's another selling point. It's a matter of trying something, new and different, and it's and they're good features. I mean, we tried them this year, and I'm like you, like the Bowtech had one, the new Elite had one, the Matthews and the Prime had some changes to the cams, that allowed more adjustability, but they weren't really like tuning features like the Bowtech or the Elite. But even so, like, they worked. I wouldn't say they were difficult to use, but I'm also kind of like you. Like, I don't know that that's something that your average bow hunter is asking for, or is even really going to do. I mean, most of your guys, they can adjust the poundage on their limbs and move their sight, maybe move their rest to paper tune it, and that's about all the average guy is comfortable with. I mean, I can do a little bit of stuff on my bow. I can tinker with it, probably just enough to be dangerous. But like for serious work that I need to press it or something, I mean, I like to take it to a pro shop. So when you start messing with cam lean and stuff like that, like that's some pretty advanced stuff. So, again, like it works and it's pretty cool, but I don't know. I guess I'm kind of on the fence. It's like, does the average bow hunter need that or not? And maybe they do. So.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I kind of default and think, we're still killing deer at 20 yards, like most of us, and when I talk to, I would consider like my kind of group of buddies is maybe, more into it than like the average weekend warrior.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go on a couple trips and, they have access to me and they're consumers of information. And if you ask those guys to set up their own bow, no way. Like there's no way they're going to do it. And even, I have a press I have everything in my office. Like if I said, here you go, guys, there would be there's no bows getting set up. There might be some limbs getting cracked and some eyeballs getting popped out when things explode. But so I realize, part of it is these bow companies need something to advertise and talk about. And I'm sure there is a percentage of consumers who they're going through the manual and going, this makes sense to me. Like I know how to adjust this. And the easier they make it, if it's just a twist of an Allen wrench or something, and you can move things back and forth and get some center shot in line or something like that, it's probably a good thing. I'm kind of cynical about it and look at it and go, man, the 20-yard whitetail crowd, are they getting this? And I guess I just really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. And like I say, I mean, the tuning systems that we messed with this year, I mean, they were as simple as that. I mean, you loosen a hex bolt and make your adjustments and tighten the hex bolt back, and they did work. I mean, we were able to like with the Bowtech and the Elite both, we were able to paper tune them pretty quickly, having never used those systems. Just took them right out of the box, and no, those bows were pretty close out of the box too. And so like the way that when Danny Hinton and I were doing the test, like the way that we messed with them, we paper tune them out of the box traditionally with a rest, and then we purposely tried to get them out of whack, so to speak, with the new tuning systems, and then bring them back in, and it was pretty easy to do, and you could really fine tune things, and you did start to see some subtle shooting differences between individual shooters. Something might need to be adjusted slightly differently, for Danny than it did for me, but even so, like you say, I don't know. It was cool, and it was, and it did work, and it was something neat to write about. Again, like I guess I'm like you. When I say I don't know, I legitimately don't know. Like if most of bow hunting America is asking for that. Maybe they are. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the lesson there maybe is all of this adjustability is awesome in the right hands. And
yeah.
if you're buying a bow, or you want to be like, you want to be able to shoot really, really well, you have to start with a bow
Mm-hmm.
that is set up for you, like
Yeah.
specifically for you. And like when you're talking about, handing a bow off to Herto or whoever's shooting it and having to make changes during a bow test when you're working on objectivity. Like it's a good lesson for the average guy out there gets his hand on a
Mm-hmm.
bow. So, this is why the hand-me-down bow thing is so dangerous, like, yeah,
Sure.
just because it's a free bow doesn't mean it's a very good one for you. What would you say in testing bows and doing all the stuff you've done? What would you recommend? What's one thing you would tell the average bow hunter going out to buy a new bow? What should he think about first?
Don't get so hung up on brand loyalty. And it's, I was actually doing another podcast and had a very similar question from that host, and I gave the same answer. I think, in the bow hunting world, like every bow that we test every year is pretty damn good. There's not a bow that we tested this year that I wouldn't hunt with. But like my job and your job as people who review equipment is to lay them side by side and find the differences in them. And sometimes, and there are differences in them, as good as they all are, some of them are decidedly better than others.
Yep.
And, many times the only way that you're going to figure that out is to shoot a bunch of bows side by side. And, if you go into it thinking, well, I'm only a Matthews guy. That's all I've ever shot, and that's all I'm going to shoot. Or I'm only a Hoyt guy, and anybody that doesn't like Hoyt's a dumbass, And I mean, you see that in the bow world, probably more so than any other. I don't know what it is, but people are just fiercely brand loyal. And I mean, it's kind of one of the endearing things about the bow world, But what you may find, like beyond brand names, there may be a real difference in the draw cycle of another brand of bow that not only subjectively feels better to you, but it might fit your shooting style better, and you might shoot a lot better with that bow than you ever have with the bow that you grew up with and that you think that like that's the only brand that exists.
Yep.
And so what I would say is like all of these companies are making outstanding bows, like for the quality, the quality wise, like they're all good bows. But you will find differences between those bows. They're kind of meant for different shooting styles, and no one bow can fit everybody. And different people have different shooting styles. Like me in particular, I like a bow that has a pretty smooth, constant draw cycle. I don't like a real sharp drop into the back wall,
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people do. Like a lot of people really like that, kind of something that almost kind of clicks into the back wall.
Yep.
And I tend to shoot a bow with a shallow kind of demanding valley. I tend to shoot a bow like that pretty well. One that feels like it almost might jump away from you. I don't know if it makes me concentrate a little bit more, but it's been a trend that I've seen through 10 years of doing bow testing, or nearly 10 years of doing bow testing and shooting all these bows from different manufacturers. Like that's something that I've seen, like for my particular shooting style, a lot of times I can draw a bow now because of what I know and think I'm probably going to shoot this bow pretty well.
Yep.
And so that's what I would tell people. If you are shopping for a new bow, go into the shop with an open mind and try a Matthews, a PSE, a Hoyt, a Martin. Try everything that's on the shelf.
Yep.
Be sure that the specs fit you. Be sure that the draw length fits you. And then try them all. And shoot them as much as you can. That would probably be my biggest bit of advice, because there are differences from one bow to the next.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And the only thing I would add on to that is do not believe somebody who's getting paid to sell bows.
Yes.
Like I see very often on social media and other avenues where somebody is promoting brand company X or Y, and I know for a fact they've been getting paid for that company for a decade, and they don't shoot anything else. And how could you? And they may be promoting very good products, but how could you possibly trust somebody who's been getting paid to promote a specific brand and hasn't shot the other ones? Like,
Right.
there is, and that's the thing. I know you get hit up for this, and I do all the time. Like, what's the best bow out there? And it's like, oh man, like you said, you got to go out and shoot a whole bunch of different ones to find out which one works for you. And that was one thing that really blew my mind from year to year. Shooting a bunch of bows and setting them up and testing them was very rarely did 2 years in a row I go, that one's the best one for me.
Yeah.
It was oftentimes I'd find a new one. And like you said, it wasn't like I hated any of them. I was like, okay,
Right.
if I had to, I could hunt with any of these, but
Yeah.
I'd find one. And, like I can think back to some bows, like the Bowtech Guardian, the Elite GT500, and some of these bows we had in the past that just work so well for me.
Yeah.
And then, like the next year, I think Bowtech went from the Guardian to the 82nd Airborne was maybe the next year, one of the ones. And I couldn't shoot that bow. And I was like devout with that Guardian back in the day. And, Elite, the same thing happened to me. And you see this happen over time, or Prime or Matthews. And so keep an open mind when you're out there shopping. Broadheads, when you're testing broadheads, I'm sure you get asked about broadheads constantly. Anything you would tell the average whitetail hunter, he's going out, he's going to buy 2 packages of broadheads, we hope, at least for this season. What are you telling them?
Well, definitely shoot them on targets. You like to think that most people check their broadheads, and you like to think that if your bow's tuned, that every broadhead is going to shoot like a field point. I just did this broadhead test, and I rung out, I think, 25 new heads, and in various categories, fixed and mechanical, and I did a crossbow broadhead test, and even with bows that I knew were perfectly tuned, and from crossbows for that matter, some of them just don't hit the same as field points, especially when you get out beyond 30 yards. And so I would say that is the number one thing to check. Number 2, make sure they're sharp. Some of these broadheads are not sharp out of the package. They to be as lethal as they can be, they must be sharpened. Now, they can be made to be very sharp, some of them, and some of them can't be. Kind of, I rule of thumb, like I want to be afraid to handle my broadheads.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, if it's sharp and it hits where you aim it, it'll do. Any of them on the market will do exactly what you need it to do. You just have to put it where it needs to be.